Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us on the webinar today as we take a look at optimizing your 2D spend by switching from AutoCAD to DraftSight. My name is Connor Houghton. I'm an account manager here with CAD Micro, and today I am joined by global technology evangelist and AutoCAD expert Lynn Allen from Dassault Systems, as well as Paul Riviere, one of our partners from Team EDA. We're going to be covering a lot of ground today with our speakers, so questions will likely pop up as we go along. Our speakers would be happy to answer any questions that you may have during the Q&A period designated for the end of this session. Throughout the presentation, feel free to type any questions you may have into the question box in the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the session as well. Today, our webinar will be recorded, so you will receive a recording from us tomorrow. If any questions arise afterwards, after the session today, you can simply reply to the email that we send and we'll put you in touch with an appropriate team member to get those questions answered. To kick off the presentation today, Lynn is going to take us through a tour of DraftSight. I know many of you may be current or past users of AutoCAD, so she'll be addressing some of the common questions you may have when discussing DraftSight. This would include what does DraftSight, the learning curve look like, as well as what about AutoCAD customizations, and what about DraftSight AutoCAD compatibility and interoperability. She'll also show us some powerful tools in DraftSight that you wouldn't be able to find with AutoCAD. Then we will discuss some of the licensing options available, especially now that AutoCAD has gone away from that network licensing model. After that, we'll check in with Paul to learn more about a tool that allows you to see your license utilization, as well as how you can use that information to streamline and migrate between tools. He'll showcase how Laumum fulfills best practices for migration and gives us an interface to look at reports and types of information that the tool can provide. At the end, as promised, we'll save time to answer your questions that you may have throughout this presentation. A lot of you may be familiar with CAD Micro, and some of you may not know CAD Micro as well. So for those of you joining us, CAD Micro is a Canadian-owned and operated company that has been around for 38 years now. Our headquarters is in Toronto, but in recent years, we've opened offices across Canada in an effort to get a little bit closer to our customers and serve them a little bit better. We work with customers to enable innovation by empowering them with advanced technologies across 5 key areas. As many of you know, one of which is design software, another advanced manufacturing, advanced simulation as well, 3D scanning and or metrology, and VR, AR, and mixed reality. Some of you may already be working with us in some of these avenues already, but if you have any specific questions about the other areas that you haven't touched upon, feel free to reach out to myself or any other team members at CAD Micro to take a deeper dive. All right, so we can move forward here along with Lynn, so I'll pass things along, but before I do, we want to ask a quick question to you guys to get a better idea of who's on the call with us today. So would we be able to launch that first poll? Perfect. So we'd like to know what type of software you're currently using in-house. We'll give you a few seconds to answer that poll. Your company may even be using multiple of these softwares. So just put what the primary tool is for the purposes of the poll. Couple more seconds here. Got a mix of answers going on. Okay, so our results there, we're looking at quite a bit of SolidWorks, all of you actually using SolidWorks, some with AutoCAD and some with DraftSight. And then generally no other software is being used, so that's fairly interesting. bit of a range there. So really excited now to pass things over to Lynn. She's very well known in the AutoCAD world, and her insight should be able to bring an interesting conversation when talking about DraftSight that should be great for you guys. Lynn?
Hi, thank you very much, Connor. Appreciate that. And thanks all of you who decided to join us today. That was really interesting that you're all using SolidWorks. All right, that's good to know. I appreciate these polls. Just a little background on myself. I actually come from the land of Autodesk and AutoCAD. I've been using AutoCAD since release 1.4, if you can imagine, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, for sure, a long time ago. And I worked for Autodesk for almost 25 years. I was actually their face of AutoCAD for most of that time, and an evangelist for them. And so for those of you who do know AutoCAD, I've done hundreds of CAD videos. I've presented on AutoCAD it was like estimated like 500,000 people face to face. And then I've done, my videos have reached millions of people, and I've had a column in a magazine on AutoCAD. I've written 3 books on AutoCAD. So look, I think through the eyes of an AutoCAD user as I deliver this presentation to you. So you'll see that there's a lot of references to the world of AutoCAD as I talk to you about making the switch over to DraftSight. So if you're an AutoCAD person and that's the way you think, you're in good hands, because that's like the only way I know how to address it. Okay. And I also have a poll for you. So Madeline, I would love it if you'd be so kind as to ask them our second question, just so I have a little bit more information. I already know some very valuable information that's going to help me as I do this presentation. And then, of course, that's when we're trying to find out if you've had a chance to look at DraftSight. You know, maybe you've worked with it just a little bit, maybe you've used it. Maybe you downloaded the trial and tried it for a while there. Of course, DraftSight was free. You might have used it back then, or maybe I have a few experts on here. Maybe you even know DraftSight better than me, which is totally a possibility. And let's see what we got. All right, it looks like, and this is looks like some of you have used it a little, some of you have never touched it, and we have a few experts. All right, well, you guys can correct me if I get off the beaten path. All right, that's perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for that. All right, there we go. Back. So my objective today is that I'm going to talk to you about how DraftSight, I believe, absolutely can fill your CAD needs. And of course, one of the great things about making the move over to DraftSight is that you'll have a little bit more money in your budget or your pocket, depending on who you are, because you can actually save quite a bit of money by making the move over to DraftSight. And I also believe that DraftSight is, you know, the perfect solution for some types of users, and I think it's not the perfect solution for some types of users. So let's talk about that, because ultimately we want you to be happy. We don't want you to make the move to DraftSight if it's not a good fit for you. So I do think it's a good fit for you. Of course, if money is really important to you. I joke that first slide had a money tree on there. Most of us don't have a money tree growing in our backyards. I know I don't. So if money is an issue with you, or maybe you just would like to take that budget money and put it somewhere else and use it for something else, maybe some better hardware, or focus it on a different project, whatever the situation is, that's definitely one advantage of making the move over to DraftSight. Maybe you want a perpetual license of DraftSight. So, and most of you are probably familiar with that, but that basically means that you own that license. And if you decide you don't want to pay annual subscription or maintenance fees, you technically don't have to. You will end up staying on that same release of the software. Maybe that's fine with you, but you own that particular license. That's an option that you have with DraftSight, which of course you no longer have with AutoCAD. Or network licenses, really important for those of you from large companies, right? Maybe you have 50 casual users of AutoCAD who hardly ever touch it, just every once in a while, but you want them to be able to access it for that very limited amount of time when they need it. So, but you really only maybe wanted to get a network license for maybe 20 users or maybe even 10 users. So that's something where the Autodesk is getting away from, right? They're making everybody have a license. That is a tremendous increase in cost for especially big corporations, right? So that's another reason. DraftSight, of course, supports network licenses, which is a big reason a lot of people are really starting to take a look at DraftSight. And then I think this is really important. You do need to be open-minded. So DraftSight is not AutoCAD. It is I like to call them fraternal twins, not identical twins. Very, very similar to AutoCAD. I mean, I think you're going to feel right at home in no time at all, but it is by no means exactly like AutoCAD. First of all, that would be wrong. I worked at Autodesk for a long time. They worked hard to create their software. You can't just go out and completely duplicate it. That would be completely wrong. So there's that. But also because, if AutoCAD's been around for almost 40 years and DraftSight is a much newer product. And if you were to design a CAD product from scratch, in the more recent years, you would just do some things differently. I mean, AutoCAD, once again, been around 40 years, has a lot of commands that people don't use anymore. There would be no reason to include those commands in the product. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but you will find that the commands that you use, the popular commands, almost all the commands that you're using, probably all of the commands that you're using on a daily basis are in the product, and that's really what's important, but none of those old legacy features that you're not using. So you do need to be open-minded though. It's not exactly like AutoCAD, and I'll show it to you. We're gonna go and we're gonna take a look at it. I'm gonna show you the things that are the same. I'll show you some of the differences, and you have to decide for yourself whether or not that's gonna work out for you. Yeah, that's why we're doing this webinar, right? And it's a good solution for you if you're unhappy with your existing CAD company, whatever it is. It may not even be Autodesk, and maybe you just don't like the way you're being treated, or things aren't working out, or you just are looking for more. Then it's a great solution for you. Then I just like this picture, and you're craving your CAD freedom. And we're nice. The people that I work with at DraftSight are very nice and open-minded and happy to try to help you make changes if you need it. Now, DraftSight is definitely not for you and I can't emphasize this enough, and you may have someone in your company that falls under this category if it's not you, but if you live and die by the AutoCAD sword, or this picture is, you can have my AutoCAD when you take it from my cold, dead hands, guess what? DraftSight is not for you, because that person, maybe it's you, maybe it's not, is never going to be happy with any product in the world except for AutoCAD. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you work, 10 hours a day, for 5 days a week or whatever, all the time on AutoCAD, I have a tendency to say, please let that person keep their AutoCAD. Everybody else can have DraftSight in your office, because they do work really well together. There's nothing wrong with if you have 20 seats of CAD where you get that one person who loves their AutoCAD and is going to have a heart attack and make your life miserable and whine all the time. Let them keep their AutoCAD, and for everybody else, give them DraftSight. The casual user, really, there's no reason they can't live happily ever after in the land of DraftSight, as I'll show you. But I like people to be happy, and I do not like whining, that is for sure. So we want no whining, we want only happiness. So as we go through the agenda, you already saw some of this, but I'm going to take you through the user interface. Just spend a few minutes. I don't have a lot of time with you today, but let's get over the basic hurdle, like what does it look like, and how, am I going to be okay in there, and what does that learning curve look like? There are some cool tools in DraftSight that you are going to wish that your current CAD tool had. When I was at Autodesk, I begged for a few of them. I wasn't able to get them, but I'm happy to say that DraftSight has them, which is fantastic. And what about your customization? If you spent time, or someone in your office spent time customizing your CAD, your AutoCAD probably, what's going to happen? You don't want to have to do that all over again, right? We're going to talk about that. I'll just really quickly talk about what's new in the latest release of DraftSight. We're actually about to come out with another one as well. And there are a couple different DraftSight options. I want to make sure you get the right one, right? We want to make sure that you're purchasing the right one and it's all clear to you. So we're going to educate you today, and then of course you're going to make the best decision for you. All right. So the first impressions. Now, the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time getting up to speed on a new CAD product, right? That sounds horrible. We don't have time for that. You have projects to get out the window, out the door or out the window. You don't want to have to start all over. Of course, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm going to tell you it's not steep and it's not long, because one of the best things about DraftSight is it does speak AutoCAD, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about when we get into the program, which is exactly what we're going to do right now. In fact, I'm just going to start in a new drawing. Let's start in a brand new drawing, which incidentally, brand new drawing, look at the name. It's called No Name. Instead of drawing one, it's called No Name, which I immediately know that DraftSight is cool because it's named after a rapper. That's right. There's a rapper named No Name. You probably didn't, maybe you didn't knew that. You knew that or didn't know that. You might see DraftSight's cool. All right, so just kind of taking a look at the screen. In fact, I need to move my little GoToMeeting guy around. You need to go over here somewhere. Take a look at the screen. It should feel a little bit like AutoCAD, does it? Look at lower left-hand corner, the command line, lower left-hand corner where the good Lord intended it to go, as I like to say. You can move it. It doesn't have to be down there. That's just where I like it to be. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's some palettes. This one has a lot of news on it. And now that's not uncommon. Autodesk does the same thing in AutoCAD. It likes to flash information. Okay, that's got to go though. That's definitely got to go. Now the sheet set manager, I like the sheet set manager that was added in the latest release. If you don't like that, you can turn that off. You guys all know how all of these palettes work. You can open them, you can close them. 3D Content Central, you're familiar with that. If you're SolidWorks users, and you were all SolidWorks users, I don't need to tell you about that, but you can access great content and bring it into DraftSight. Home by Me, you may or may not be familiar with that. Of course, there had to be some advertisement for this. Very cool. It's a free product. If for those of you who are really into, decide you want to do some redesigning of your own home, want a little interior decorating, whatever, very cool product, free. Check it out. Also by Dassault Systems. Check it out. It's free. Anyway, let's close that. You don't need that in your DraftSight though. I don't need that in my CAD product. It's got to go. And then what is this? Okay, this is the G-code generator tab. Some of you might be interested in that since it looks like all of you are in the mechanical space. So that's something you might want to take a look at. I might leave that on there. And then properties, for those of you who are AutoCAD users, you absolutely can identify with the properties palette. So I like that one as well. All right, I feel a little more at home, a little more comfortable. What else have I got going on the screen? Well, let's look at the status bar in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. This is a little bit light, right? The AutoCAD one filled with tools from left to right, and you can even add more. This one's a little bit light. If I move my cursor down here, I'm going to show you it's very similar though to the AutoCAD one, except, what is this first one? TB layers. What's that, Lynn? I have no idea what that is. You're going to wish you had that in AutoCAD. I'm going to talk about it later. I have true feature envy from that tool right there. But the rest of it, look at this. There's Snap, okay, and Grid, and Ortho. Those should all make you feel right at home, right? Those are inside of AutoCAD. And by the way, did you see the function keys right next to it? The function keys in DraftSight map right up to the function keys inside of AutoCAD. Good to go. And then there's a couple of other things, like what is this guy right here? Oops, next one. eSnap. eSnap, we don't have eSnaps in AutoCAD. We have O-snaps in AutoCAD. All right, can you handle that? That's that not identical twin, but fraternal twin. Instead of eSnaps in AutoCAD, they're called O-snaps, right? Object snaps. DraftSight entities. Inside of AutoCAD, they're objects, right? Okay, so you'll see that. I think you can handle it. For all the money you're going to save, I think you can handle the one character difference. Am I right? Okay, let's go over here, and you will see E-track, entity tracking versus O-track for object tracking, right? It's those types of things. And all the rest of these, for the most part, you will be familiar with. Q input, that's the same as dynamic input, different character, same functionality. And then, of course, we have coordinates, we have the scale factors. You'll see these are exactly the same, okay? Very similar, fraternal versus identical. Okay, what else have we got going on? Up here in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, we have the quick access toolbar. That's the same as AutoCAD, maybe slightly different tools, but you can customize that and make it exactly the same if you want to. And you've probably customized yours anyway, I would have. We have workspaces, so we were looking at the drafting and annotation one. What about this? There's a 3D modeling one. You SolidWorks folks are going to love that one. If we have any old school AutoCAD users, you can actually go back to the classic workspace. Now, Autodesk took that away from AutoCAD. We had to work hard to get that one back. It's not an AutoCAD anymore. But for those of you who prefer pull-down menus or you prefer the toolbars, you can bring it back very, very quickly. Now, I actually, of course, have my own workspace, so I'm going to put that up on the screen because I like to be all at home and comfortable. All right, what else is going on, Lynn? What else is going on? Here's all of my open tabs. Here I have a joint file right there, my open tabs. And you'll notice that I don't have any, I can't pull these tabs down from the ribbon. There's like no tools hiding underneath here. Does that mean I don't have as many commands as I do inside of AutoCAD? Where'd they all go? I'm feeling like I'm not, this isn't going to be a good fit for me. I don't want to lose any of my key commands. Actually, instead of having a pull down panel like we're used to having inside of AutoCAD, you will actually see underneath these commands, like under the line command, look, there are a lot more commands, unlike AutoCAD. So they've just been moved up a little bit. So underneath line, you'll see infinite line. What's that? An X line. You'll see array. That's the same command. And a rich line, what is that? That's an M line from AutoCAD. And believe me, these rich lines, way better than M lines in AutoCAD. I don't like M lines anyway. They're one of the worst commands inside of AutoCAD. No loss there. How about here? We pull this down, polylines, and then you'll also see underneath here rectangles and polygons. Those are the exact same commands. Ring, what is that? Oh, if I click on it, ring, do you know what that is? It's the donut command inside of AutoCAD. I was a little sad to see that the donut command was not inside of DraftSight. That alone made me go, I don't know if I can work with this program. But it doesn't matter, because you know what? This is what I was saying. DraftSight speaks AutoCAD. If I start to type in donut, can you see, look in the lower left-hand corner there, you will see that it knows that that means I'm trying to get to the ring command, because I don't have time to relearn all of these commands. But if I know what the command is in AutoCAD, you can just start to key it in and it will figure it out for you. Yes, that's fabulous. For example, how about purge? There's no purge command in DraftSight, but as soon as I start typing purge, which, by the way, what a terrible name for a command, right? After an incredibly violent movie. I want to clean out the evil spirits from inside of my join file. Anyway, there's a clean command inside of DraftSight. See, even the commands are nicer. Clean, the clean command. So if I execute that, it will take me into the clean command. So very, very friendly and very, very easy to work with. So no problem. That learning curve, you can see, just got shorter and easier. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize with you. Okay, I just want to show you just like one, maybe two more things in here. The third most frequently used command inside of AutoCAD, layer. So let's take a look at those. Oh my gosh. Now inside of AutoCAD is called the layer manager. Inside of DraftSight, it's the layers manager. We will not charge you for the extra character. But look at this. How do you feel? Does it look different? A little. It has grid lines. I was a math major. That makes me even happier. So I actually like the layer dialog box in DraftSight better than I do inside of AutoCAD. You will see I have the exact same 4 commands up here, 4 tools up here. The only difference is they actually decided to tell me what the commands were instead of just giving me the icons that I have to figure out. So we have new, we have VP freeze, we have delete and activate. What is that? Activate is just how you select, set a new current layer. Okay, so instead of calling it a current layer, they're calling it the activated layer. Fraternal twins, not identical twins. Are you with me? All right, super easy. There's layer states in here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to pull all these open. Okay, I'll pull this one open. But you'll see layer states. You still have the same options. Very, very, very robust dialog box here where there's filters. So you should be able to do everything that you need to do with layers inside of DraftSight. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, I'm going to leave it at that. I am going to leave it at that. And I'm going to jump back over to my PowerPoint. So once again, just kind of an overview. You'll see inside of AutoCAD on the left, right, we have object snaps versus entity snaps. You can see you should be able to get your jobs done just fine. You'll see slightly different wording. This is that, once again, fraternal twins versus identical twins. And then, of course, you need to worry about how well does it read DWG files and DWT template files and DXF files, etc. Well, it does a fabulous job. I'm going to dive into that just a little bit more in a second, but I always like to remind people that, we have had millions of downloads of DraftSight. So you're not alone. It's a very, very, very popular product. We have a lot of very happy users. So let's talk about this DWG and DWT and all that good stuff. So if you were to go into, and I just did a video on this for Catalyst Magazine, and I've done a bunch of videos on DraftSight. So if you want more information, I think at the very end, I'll give you a URL where you can look at more videos that I've done. They're short, they're sweet, they're like 4 or 5 minutes long, and they cover different topics. But I did one, just the last one that I did, that had to do with saving to different file types. Inside of AutoCAD, you'll see on the left, right, you can save all the way back to AutoCAD release 14. And you can save DXF files as well, not binary ones though. And over onto the right-hand side, I want you to see that you can save all the way back to release 12 with the DWG. In fact, I once, when I worked for Autodesk, I had a gentleman in one of my presentations who came up to me and he told me that they always kept a copy of DraftSight in their office because sometimes they needed to save back even further than AutoCAD did. Now, I don't know why you need to save back to R12. I mean, that's a pretty long time ago. It's a dusty copy of AutoCAD. But if you needed to, you could. And I think really the point here is that DraftSight truly understands that DWG data. It gets it. It does a great job at duplicating it and working with it. So you'll also see that it supports binary DXFs as well as the ASCII DXFs, whereas AutoCAD just supports ASCII DXFs. Of course, the binary DXFs are way smaller, right? Faster to work with. And it also supports shape files, which I'm not going to get into right now, but you'll just see there are a lot more options with DraftSight, which I think is a plus. DraftSight is also a lot smaller, so those are things to think about as well, because then you can, okay, if you guys are using SolidWorks, I guess there's no reason for me to mention this, but if you have somebody off to the side who's not using SolidWorks, you would not have to buy them a super duper computer to run DraftSight. So maybe even at home, if you wanted to run it at home for some reason, you don't have a super duper computer at home, you'd be able to easily run DraftSight on a less than stellar computer. In fact, the one I'm working with right now, not a super duper computer. Whereas with AutoCAD, man, you know, you needed 7 gigabytes of disk space and you had to have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM to get it to be happy. You really need a 16, by the way. And DraftSight, 1 gigabyte of disk space, and that's the same with LT, by the way, for the AutoCAD. And then you only need 2 to 8 gigabytes of RAM. So big difference as far as the size and what it needs. And remember, AutoCAD's been around almost 40 years. It's gathered a lot of extra stuff. Autodesk does not like to get rid of any commands in case, you know, someone in Des Moines is using that command anymore. We don't want to upset them, or they've written a routine that involves that feature. They don't like to take commands out of AutoCAD. It's very rare when they do that. So it is a big, bulky program. Some commands are never used, but they're still in there. All right, those cool tools that you wish that you had, let's talk about those. Power trim, by far my favorite command, hands down, in DraftSight, maybe any CAD program ever. We spend a lot of time trimming and extending, especially trimming. We have to go in, we select the cutting edges, and then we pick the objects to trim. Power trim, nothing. I go into the command, I just trim. I just start to trim, everything's a cutting edge. Hold my shift key down, I can extend, same thing. Fabulous tool. I'm not a big fan of extra picks and clicks. That drives me crazy. It's boring and tedious. Power trim is awesome. Okay, I did mention to you about this command called TB layer. It's part of the toolbox, and this is a fabulous command. I wish that AutoCAD had. AutoCAD has portions of it, but it's very disparate and it's all over the place. So if this allows you to say, hey, I want all my hatch patterns on a specific layer. I want all of my text on a specific layer. I want my viewports on a specific layer, one that never prints, right? There's a lot of power that you have with the TB layer. You can set it up once and live happily ever after. And you can export it, and you can, as a CAD manager, you can export it and make everybody follow the same rules. There's a lot of possibilities here. Auto dimensioning. Remember when I was at Autodesk, they kept adding new and new dimensioning features, which was great, but I kept joking, I just want to put a big window around my whole drawing and have it automatically dimension. Well, that's kind of the concept here. You put a window called a bounding box around your drawing file, and then basically all these dimensions will pop up, baseline, continue, ordinate, you name it, whatever you need. And then you basically show them which side you want them to go to and drop the mic. That's it. My kind of tool, auto dimensioning. Then gestures. All right, I don't have to tell you about gestures. All you SolidWorks users, this also exists inside a DraftSight. That made me really happy. I wasn't a SolidWorks user when I came to Dassault Systems, so I was like, wow, this is a great tool. Love this. And it's super easy to customize and set up with your favorite commands. Very, very powerful. Okay, what about your customization? Because it would be sad if you had to do that over again, as I mentioned to you before. You have the Lisp routines that are written for AutoCAD, no problem, including Visual Lisp. I want to circle this big red no. Your PGP file, however, does not come across. What? Now your PGP file, those are your aliases. So whatever you set up inside of AutoCAD, like C for circle, L for line, those are all still, of course, going to work inside of DraftSight. But if you set up specific one, if you wanted L to be layer instead of L for line, for example, if you overrode any of those, you will have to do that again. Why, Lynn? Why do I have to do it again? Because I showed you that when I typed in donut, it executed the ring command. That's all done in the DraftSight PGP file. That's how they got that to work. And that's pretty common operating procedure with CAD programs. In fact, for AutoCAD, they wanted MicroStation users to be able to feel comfortable inside of AutoCAD. So they mapped MicroStation commands to AutoCAD commands in the PGP file in AutoCAD. Very common behavior. That's not unusual. Nothing wrong with that. That's how it was done inside of DraftSight. So you are going to have to redo those. Now, there's nothing to keep you from copy clipping what you did and dropping it right into the PGP file for DraftSight. Take you 3 seconds. You can do that, but just, be mindful that whatever you put at the bottom of a PGP file, right, it overrules what happened above it. Consequently, you might end up overwriting a very crucial command, but you have to check it out. Make sure. See what you're doing. Hopefully you'll know what you're doing. And then other things like your menus, your CUIs, right? If you have an old MNU file, I suppose it's possible. I guess it's possible. Those will come across, line types, hatch patterns, your template files, your fonts, your custom fonts, and of course your list routines that go with your menu files. All of those are good to go. So everything's looking pretty good. And it comes with a very robust API. A lot of those tools that you saw me bragging about were written in that using that robust API. That's one of the great things about DraftSight that does not come with AutoCAD LT, right, is that you have this amazing ability to truly customize it by using this very impressive API. So, and what's new in DraftSight 2021? I already mentioned to you sheet sets. I'm a big sheet set user. When I do intense demos. So consequently, I was excited about that. Importing PDFs. Well, let me click on here. Doesn't seem to want to go automatically, despite my efforts. You gonna go now? I don't want to go. Let's try again. There we go. So one of the biggest wish list items ever inside of AutoCAD was the ability to bring a PDF file, to bring it in and have it, of course, convert over to AutoCAD objects, right? Huge wish list request. They only granted it a few years ago. So now that's available inside of DraftSight as well. I actually think they did a better job because as you see right here, you can bring in more than one PDF at a time inside of a drawing file. That was something you could not do inside of AutoCAD. And you can do batch processing in that you can convert a whole bunch of PDFs at one time. It converts them to DXF files, but then you can of course bring those in as drawing files. There's also support for visual lisp. I mentioned that to you, and something called associative patterns, which you're looking at right here, which is very similar to the array command inside of AutoCAD, which was for the most part missing, but this is a step up. It kind of for some reason it's not running automatically, forgive me. It's kind of a combination where those of you who really know how to work with entity grips inside of AutoCAD, this really, it's like a combination between entity grip power user and associative patterns, associative arrays, excuse me, inside of AutoCAD. All right, getting to the part where, which DraftSight is right for you, just jumping right into that. So you are probably going to want to choose between the Enterprise version, Enterprise Plus, and I want to make sure you understand the difference between the two. Of course, you're going to contact CAD Micro to do that. That's why you're here today. You have just about all of the features that I was talking about today, almost all of them. But it's primarily focused on the 2D needs. You guys have SolidWorks, you probably are using that for your 3D, so you probably don't need everything that AutoCAD has to offer for 3D, which is nothing, by the way, compared to SolidWorks. I'm not a big fan of AutoCAD 3D. And so you probably be looking, for the most part, at DraftSight Enterprise. There are some situations where you may want Enterprise Plus, but CAD Micro is going to walk you through that and help you make that decision. So basically, I think that's the easiest way to explain the difference between the two of them. Of course, you have the ability to decide if you want a perpetual license where you own the license, or if you want a network license, that's another option for you. But that's why you definitely want to take a look at DraftSight Enterprise or Enterprise Plus. And then I also just wanted to mention, and I'm just about to wrap it up here, we did a survey to over 800 people, and we asked them about data management users, and these were specifically CAD users, by the way, data management issues. And we found out, and I'm sure you guys have run into these, that we run into issues. If you ever opened up a drawing file thinking you were working on the latest one, only to find out that no, you weren't working on the latest one. The latest one was somewhere else, and you kind of wasted your time updating the wrong file. Or if you've ever had a hard time finding specific drawing files, I know I've been there, done that. If you have issues with revision controls, or if you do spend a lot of time using the same designs over and over again. Those are the biggest data management challenges that they ran into. And we also did ask a bunch of questions on collaboration and things like that, and realized that you as CAD users have a need to make it easier to collaborate with your drawing files, and also would be great if you didn't step on each other's toes when it came to data management. And of course, if you work with SolidWorks files, you totally get that. So there is a 3D Experience DraftSight version, and especially for those of you who are making the move over to 3D Experience SolidWorks, which I hope is some of you, definitely take a look at 3D Experience DraftSight. So now we're taking the power of the cloud, right, and we're adding it to DraftSight. So now you can truly manage your CAD data up on the cloud. Much easier to manage your revisions, to keep track of changes. The collaboration is out of this world, and ideally, it keeps you from getting frustrated by having to do a bunch of rework and have a lot of conflicting edits. So take a look at 3D Experience DraftSight. On that note, I always like to say, don't listen to me. What do I know? I'm a big fan of trying it before you buy it, even though I'm sure I was super convincing. I'd like you to download DraftSight. It's absolutely free. You don't need to put a credit card in. It drives me nuts when, at the end of 30 days, you forgot to cancel and you get charged. It doesn't go like that. When you have some time, do this when you have some time to set aside, download the free trial, open up some DWG files that you have, check out your customization, wander around in there and make sure that you feel comfortable. It has the commands that you want, that you believe that you can actually make the move over to DraftSight and be successful, because that's what we want. We want you to be happy. So that way you can see for yourself whether or not DraftSight is a viable replacement for your CAD tool. I mean, I think it is. I absolutely believe that you will believe that, but I like to have you find out for yourself. And you can do it without spending any money, which is even better. And then once you do make that change over to DraftSight, you won't have to worry about that money tree growing in your backyard. You'll just be living the dream, saving all that money. What are you gonna do with all the extra money? I don't know. Me? Shoes. That's where it would go. So on that note, I want to thank you for your time. And there's my email in case you have any additional questions. I'm happy to answer them. I'm at lynn.allen@3ds.com. If you wanted to see any of those Catalyst videos, I put the URL up there. You're not going to remember that, but if you can remember Catalyst and Lynn Allen, you will find them. And of course, I also have the URL up there for the DraftSight free trial. Once again, you can just type in DraftSight and free trial, and guess what? You'll also be able to find it because of the land of Google, the magic of Google. So on that note, I am finished. I want to thank you once again so much for your time. And now I'm going to hand it over to you, Connor.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you taking the time on this. You had me smiling over here behind the camera for sure.
I'm glad you're.
We've actually got a handful of questions already coming in that we'll address later on during the presentation. So we'll get you back on for that.
Okay, great.
But for the time being, we will pass it over to Paul. We've spent some time with Lynn hearing about how many businesses are making that switch from AutoCAD to DraftSight. But what does Team EDA bring to a migration project like that?
Thanks, Connor. So yeah, I'd like to talk about the best practices that we consider at Team EDA for engineering software migration using our solution, Licensed Asset Manager with Usage Monitoring. So we call it LAMUM or LAMUM for short, but going through some of the migration best practices, it's important to know what you have. So taking a look at your vendor, your tools, the license types, whether it be annual subscription or perpetual, or whether it's node locked, named user, or floating licenses, the number of seats or licenses that you have. But there's more essential information that you need to gather, and that's the PO number, whether you purchase directly from the vendor or reseller, the subscription type, as I mentioned, the costs associated with that tool, who are the contacts, both internally and at the vendor or the reseller, the acquisition date, and very important is understanding the expiration date, knowing when that is when it comes time for renewal. Advancing to knowing what you are using. So being conscious of your daily, weekly, monthly, or annual utilization, whether it's currently to understand your usage versus capacity, understanding license abuse, whether it be long checkouts, duplicate licenses, or understanding denials and what you're willing to accept for denials. And then historically, to take a better look and analyzing your usage versus capacity over time, understanding the trends, looking at peaks, perhaps during new product introductions, and taking the costs that might be absorbed by a shared engineering services organization and allocating that back to the users, the cost center, or perhaps the project for the new product introduction. And then lastly, looking at knowing what you need. So, what are the license ratios that you're migrating from to? And looking at LAMUM and using it to optimize. So let's take a closer look at LAMUM. And LAMUM is it's a very comprehensive integrated solution for license management where you can centralize and share all of the license asset information from vendor to tool, license, understanding the server if there's any license managers involved or daemons, understanding your renewal information. Extending that in the floating or networked or concurrent license environment to understand your usage monitoring and being able to report in the form of tables and graphs. We have an extensive tool called the FlexLM Daemon Manager because FlexLM is one of the most common license managers in the industry. We integrate FlexLM Daemon Manager in so we can actively integrate with it inside of LAMUM instead of having the user log into their license server, connect through the FlexLM utility and manage that environment. We can do it directly from LAMUM. Many warnings or alerts so we can notify of long checkouts, duplicate license checkouts. Perhaps we're approaching or exceeding capacity on our license usage. Perhaps we've exceeded our limits on denials we're willing to accept. So many alerts. And another one, most importantly, is expirations and then having 30 to 60 days to work on renewals. Determining the chargeback allocation where we can allocate the cost for perhaps a 30-day billing cycle. But most importantly, LAMUM is a decision support system. So following best practices, knowing what you have, knowing what you're using, and identifying what you need and need to use more efficiently using LAMUM to optimize. With the license asset manager portion of LAMUM, we take a look at the licenses from a line item perspective. And again, just to mention again is, the most important information is understanding the vendor name, the tool name, the number of licenses associated with it. When was it acquired? When does it expire? The purchase type. And much more information that's important going forward, and understanding that responsible person who's going to be the champion or advocate for the license, negotiating new contract or license terms, and taking action to ensure that the licenses are renewed in a timely fashion. And from that line item for the license, we can make that connection to the license manager in a floating license environment to look at the port at host or the daemon, capture utilization, perhaps take a closer look at the license files, the options files, and the debug log files to gather more information. So taking all of that information in the license line item and taking a look right here at what we see in our demo environment for License Asset Manager with usage monitoring. And here we're looking at 22 items that we have that are expiring in the future. So we're taking a look at, in this case, from A to Z or Abacus to ZAware, understanding our license assets and getting a closer look at all of the information related to it. So now that we know what we have, we can take a closer look at knowing what we're using. So we can do this in two report types, whether it be in a current checkout status or current overview, or in a historical usage. So from a current checkouts overview perspective, we can look at it from a table, looking at current checkouts overview, understanding the tools or features that we have, what tag, which is simply a friendly name for the port at host it's running on, how many licenses, how many are in use, whether they're reserved, and taking a closer look at the percentage utilized. In another format, and simply by clicking on the left-hand side at Gauge Display Select, we can take another look in this way in a gas gauge format, something more palatable that you could use as your dashboard. Here we're looking at the same information we looked at on the table, but we're looking at it in more of a gas gauge display where we can see the number of licenses used versus our capacity. And in the blue representation of the tool at the tag name, we can click on that. It's hyperlinked to take us closer to look at the usage details. And here we are looking at current checkout details, where we're taking a closer look at the users that have licenses checked out. We see our capacity and the total used, what machine the users are coming in from, how long they've checked it out, and the total time in use. And all of these column headers, as you can see, are sortable. So we can look at users alphabetically, we can look at time in use chronologically. And if we wanted to, we could do a remove, which in a FlexLM environment is the same as the LM remove command to check a license back in. What we could do is then with our Active Directory link for each user is click on their name to gather more information. Try to reach them by email or phone. And if we can't, and we need that license to be checked in because it's been checked out beyond our policy of checkout time, we could do a remove and check that license back in for others to use. So we've looked at current utilization. Now let's take a look at history. And in this case, and the purposes of a migration is a 180-day history graph where we're looking at usage for a tool called MATLAB, and it's on our license server called Demo3. And we're taking a look across a 6-month time frame. And as you can see, we have consistent use where we are reaching or maximizing capacity of our licenses. And if you see at the center of the screen, you're looking at on May 20th, we had 20 licenses in use on a capacity of 20. And we're reaching that or maximizing at that count continuously. Might be an indication that it's time to take a closer look at license utilization, looking for abuse, perhaps long checkouts with engineers that might have a license checked out for their own use and not returning it for others to use, perhaps duplicate licenses, perhaps looking closer at denials and understanding that the denials might be exceeding the acceptable limit, and start looking at perhaps renegotiating for a higher license count, getting more licenses from your vendor or reseller. So for each feature, we can also take a closer look at the user details. And looking at the users as we did before and for current utilization, now we're looking at it historically. And in this case, a 30-day table might be a 30-day billing cycle, so we can allocate costs accordingly. So by knowing the cost of this particular tool on this license server, let's say it's $75,000 for 30 days, we can allocate that cost according to the percentage of usage by each individual user, allocate that back to the cost center, or perhaps allocate it back to the project for the new product introduction to make sure that those costs are recouped. So now that we know what we have, we know what we've been using, we can take a look at what we need. So in a node locked or named user environment, it might be as simple as a 1-to-1 ratio. But have you considered those casual or short duration users, those users that aren't using it daily? Perhaps they're using it for less than an hour a day, and you're tying up a license for them. That might be some cost wasted, and funding that could be used elsewhere. So why not look at single user to a floating license migration? Rule of thumb for most businesses might be 3-to-2 ratio. So for 100 users, you might need 67 floating licenses. However, let's take a closer look through LAMUM and optimizing to understand the usage patterns. So collecting data, monitoring and analyzing more closely, understanding idle license time periods by looking at checkout heat maps or denials heat maps, understanding the denial frequency and what's our acceptable limit, and understanding more closely utilization as a whole, and taking the opportunity to manage it and monitor it for efficient usage and optimize licenses to get licenses used more efficiently. So in summary, LAMUM is a comprehensive license inventory or asset management tool. It provides comprehensive usage reporting as well as current usage reporting to take a look at utilization of your licenses and monitor more efficiently and manage efficiently for better use. We can create on-demand usage reports to place into your favorites browser, perhaps in the favorites tab of LAMUM, or creating your own personal dashboard in a PowerPoint or on your desktop with the simple click of a click. You get into the report, whether it be a table or a graph, to what you want to look at instantly. For those long generating reports, we can create batch reports through our batch reports generator, have them available on a Monday morning in our email or in a file folder to bring up first thing in the morning. We have numerous alerts to look at long checkouts, duplicate checkouts, capacity thresholds being reached or approaching, perhaps denial limits being reached. We have the FlexLM Daemon Manager to integrate with FlexLM to go directly from LAMUM, not having to exit, making a remote connection to the license server, starting up the FlexLM utility. We can do it directly from LAMUM to manage that daemon environment. And feature name aliasing, which is commonly overlooked. And when you look at a license file, you might see features that are represented by a bunch of numbers or alphanumeric characters, which might be meaningless, especially for an engineering manager who's being asked to reimburse for utilization. We can simply apply a feature name alias to something that's more meaningful and representable in that report and easier to approve. So with that, thank you for your time. This is just, a quick overview of how to look at LAMUM, how to use it for migration purposes, perhaps consider it for consolidation of your license asset managements and usage monitoring needs. Consider it for compliance and for audit purposes. But if you'd like to look more, please contact us for a demonstration, and we'd love to get you into a free 30-day trial. Thanks, Connor, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul, and definitely some interesting information there. And I'd like to thank both our speakers again. As promised, we're going to jump into some questions that came in along the way. If you've got any additional questions that you've got but haven't entered, please throw them into the question box now. But right now we've got a bit of a queue of questions, so we'll go ahead and get started with those. So first off, this will head over to you, Lynn. Is DraftSight a good option for educational institutes or students?
Sure, I don't see why it wouldn't be. It's absolutely, it's 2D CAD. Anybody who learns DraftSight can certainly use AutoCAD or any 2D CAD equivalent, and the price is great. So I think it would be a great way to learn the land of 2D CAD for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. And this one came in actually before you mentioned it as well at the end, that there is a trial version available for DraftSight. People were asking how they can get a free version to try and play around with. Oh, another one here, Lynn, for you is, are there any learning resources online for DraftSight?
There are some. Good question. I should have a better answer for this because I don't know exactly where to direct you, but I bet you guys can help them with that. They're about to come out with a whole bunch of learning resources, but there are some, if you go to the DraftSight website, there are some, if there is some information up there about where you can learn it. It is once again 2D CAD, so any of your existing CAD knowledge that you have is pretty easy to transfer over unless you don't know any 2D CAD at all and you're starting from scratch. But there are a variety. I mean, there's a bunch of independent people, just like the land of YouTube, but a bunch of independent people who've done it. And I have a boatload of, like I said, a Catalyst videos that I've done as well. So we just need to curate it better to make it easier for people to get a hold of it.
Makes sense. And I know there's definitely some information that they're adding to, Dassault is adding to the 3D experience platform for that as well. It may be directed a little bit more towards the 3D experience DraftSight, but there is information up there.
Good.
Last one here for you, Lynn. Do you know with DraftSight Standard whether you can run Lisp programs, or is that strictly for premium?
No, you can run Lisp routines on standard.
Okay.
Unlike LT, right?
Yeah. So over to
good question. Good question.
good questions from everyone. You're getting a little bit of love here, Lynn. People are following some of your stuff over the years as well.
Oh, good. I can't see anything you guys wrote. I don't have the ability because I'm not an organizer to see what you wrote. They'll have to tell me later, but thank you. Whatever you said, thank you.
Over to you, Paul. How is LAMUM licensed and priced?
So LAMUM is licensed based on the number of maximum unique users that are using the software that's being monitored. So it's priced, we have annual subscription model, we have a perpetual subscription model, we even have a 4-month trial model. So if a customer tries a 30-day free trial or perhaps wants to jump into a lengthier trial, we have a 4-month trial evaluation that can also be purchased.
Okay, makes sense. So another one here for you, Paul. About the migration planning, how much of that license data, license usage data is needed to do that planning?
Well, typically for a migration, you want to have a lot of usage under your belt. So in my example, I use 180 days. So you want to get a fair collection of usage so you can understand the trends and the peaks. And as you saw in my 180 days, it was pretty consistent how we were, in that particular example for 20 licenses, we were reaching or at 20 licenses consistently. In our demo environment for MATLAB, we actually have 3 licensed servers. So in addition to the 20, there's one with 15 and one with 10 licenses. So we're able to balance that load accordingly. But if a customer is, consistently reaching max license utilization, then, they want to use a tool like LAMUM to start looking more closely at utilization and understanding those peaks and looking at long checkouts, looking at denials and making the right decisions, using it to their advantage and, contacting their reseller or their vendor and saying, it's time I increase my license count.
Right. Okay, another one here. I know you mentioned this, Paul, during your presentation, again with trials, but where can somebody go to get a trial before they purchase?
So they could come directly through me. They can go through info@teameda.com, but they can go right to teameda.com, and we have a web-based form where they simply select free 30-day trial, enter the information that's pertinent. How do we contact them to obtain more information? There's also a form there where they can enter more details. What software do they want to utilize or monitor? What are their pain points? And pain points are, very important to us in understanding how we're going to propose LAMUM and how to solve their problems. And when we do the demonstration, that's how we cater and highlight the features that are going to solve their problems. And by that, we can, propose the right solution for them and get them hopefully right into that 30-day trial, work on a weekly basis to do phase reviews and step them into more advanced features as we go to the end of that 30 days.
Perfect. All right, so we're just a little bit over time here, so I think we can wrap things up. As I mentioned, we'll send a recording after this presentation tomorrow. And if you have any questions after we're done here, you can feel free to reply to that email and we'd be happy to answer those afterwards. Once again, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Paul, for great presentations. And thank you all for spending a little bit of time with us here on this Tuesday. And keep up to date with everything going on with CAD Micro on all our social media platforms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.